Alright, so the whole point of this deck is to turbo out Absolute Zero, and then abuse his effect with World Legacy Clash, Paradox Fusion, and this new Link monster called Miss Cape Barber. Okay, so final thoughts on this deck. You know, I just realized, like, cycling through these cards only really mattered when that was the only thing I did at the end of the video. Because I used to, like, at the beginning of the video, I would explain the deck for 5 minutes and then start it. Which I don't think is a very good way to do it. I think just a quick little blurb is better. And then I realized, you know, hey, if you just skip to the end of the video to look at the deck list, how would you know exactly where to skip to? Because I'm only going through at the very beginning. You know what? That doesn't really matter. So, for this deck right here, the whole point of it, as you probably saw in the video, was to remove Absolute Zero from the field in order to activate its effect to destroy all your opponent's cards. And the main way it does that is with World Legacy Clash, Paradox Fusion, a Miss Cape Barber, and of course getting rid of it through like a fusion. You know, using it as a material to bring out one of the other Omni heroes. Now, here's the thing with this deck. I only drew into Paradox Fusion in like one duel. This card, it seemed like it was so good. It's literally like a Solemn Judgment that also activates Absolute Zero's effect, and he even returns to the field in 2 turns. I was like, this card is a perfect tech option for Absolute Zero. The problem was I never drew into it. I drew into it 1 duel, and in that 1 duel I drew into 3 copies of it. Or I drew it into other duels in which I never actually brought out Absolute Zero. You know, it was kind of dead. It seems so good. Like, a perfect first turn is Absolute Zero and then a Paradox Fusion. Kind of. I don't know. It's actually a little bit... You have more clout with it if you use Battled World Legacy. Because the thing is, World Legacy Clash is a newish card that came out, which basically has Interdimensional Matter Transporter as its effect. And it also has an effect to permanently reduce the attack and defense of an opponent's monster by the attack and defense of the monster removes from the field. So you remove Absolute Zero to reduce a monster's attack by 2,500. So if you use it against, like, you know, a destruction immune card, like one of the Thunder Dragons, that's pretty good. That means you'll be able to beat over it by battle. I don't think it really applied in that situation too much. It was still really good for getting rid of, you know, Absolute Zero. It was like a better interdimensional matter transporter because it's, whatchamacallit, it's a quick play spell card, which means you can use it during your turn, and there's more versatility to it. The only downside is you need your opponent to have a monster in order to use it. So you can't use it to protect, you know, one of your cards if your opponent doesn't have a monster out and they're trying to destroy it, which never really came up. Usually your opponent will use monsters in order to destroy your monsters, so yeah. As for the rest of the deck, the engine for it, I actually experimented with a few different engines, and the Neos Fusion engine seemed to work, well, not really a Neos Fusion engine. It was more like the Isolde engine worked the best. That's why I have Neospatian Connector in here, you know, just for Isolde. I don't think I ever drew into it a single time. So it was basically not in here because it's also not searchable except through reinforcements of the army, which I'd usually use on something else. So like with Isolde, you know, that's why I'm running these equip cards right here. That way I can bring out Grappler Angler, who is the only level 1 warrior type monster. Not the only level 1 warrior type monster. He's like the only water type. I specifically use this card because it's water type. Because there's like a lack of good water elemental heroes. Because Absolute Zero needs a water monster plus any hero monster. It's the only Omni hero which doesn't require an elemental hero. Because like all the other ones require an elemental hero. Except Absolute Zero. He's just any hero monster plus a water monster. So, I could run Vision Hero. Well, I guess that was it. I had a couple of others. I was like, oh, I can run evil heroes as well, and I ended up not really doing that. I did try it out in a different build that I never actually made over here. This one seemed to work the best. Going into Isolde sometimes to bring out Angler, who gives me a water monster in the graveyard so that I can use Miracle Fusion later, or a water monster on the field so I can just use Polymerization, which I did use a lot. It's also, a tuner, so it's an option for Needle Fiber, which isn't actually in this deck. Huh. I just noticed that I know I removed it from purpose because my extra deck is completely stacked. Like, there is no room in here at all for anything. Okay, so let's see, what else did this deck do? I think that was really it. You know, just Neo's Fusion in order to dump Treeborn or Sinister Serpent, or Shadow Mist into the grave. All three of those are good targets. My priorities were, you know, Treeborn Frog first, and if he was already in the graveyard, then Shadow Mist, if I hadn't already sent him, and if he's not available, then Sinister Serpent was like my third option because it's a water type. It also helps out a lot. It also helped me win a couple of duels, like Treeborn Frog because of the Link Karibo combo, where if you have Link Karibo in the graveyard, you can use its effect during the standby phase to bring itself out, and Treeborn Frog, so you basically get 2 monsters on field every turn. And then Sinister Serpent recovers itself from the grave. So there was like one duel in which I was definitely behind and like losing. And during my standby phase, I went +3, basically, because I got Link Karibo, Treeborn Frog, and Sinister Serpent out, well, in my hand. And then I was able to bring out Phoenix Blade back into my hand and, you know, bring out Unicorn with all those cards and get over my opponent's monster, and that won me the duel. So that was pretty cool. And it's easily set up with Neo's Fusion, who's basically a glorified Foolish Burial for level 4 lower monsters, thanks to Brave Neos. And also, Neos Knight is in here, because you can use it to send Malicious to the grave, but he's usually sent to the grave with Vision Hero. Alright, and I think that's it.